Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're taking what feels like a monumental energetic leap.
It really is, isn't it?
Yeah. We're shifting our focus entirely. We're moving on from all that foundational work we did on grounding, on survival, the root chakra,
Mm-hmm.
and we're diving into this vibrant, flowing realm of pure experience, emotion, creation, and I think most beautifully sacred pleasure.
That is the perfect way to frame this.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, if the root chakra Muladhara was all about gravity, just making sure you had firm ground under your feet, that your basic needs were met.
Right, security.
Exactly. Then Svadhisthana is, well, it's about hydrodynamics. It's the
Mhm.
part of us that takes that solid foundation and then asks, okay, now that I'm safe,
Yeah.
how do I dance? How do I
Uh-huh.
feel? How do I create?
Okay, let's unpack that. Because our listeners shared sources on this specific energy center, Swadhisthana, and the core promise woven through all of it is incredibly compelling.
It is.
The sources basically propose that unlocking and balancing this one center is like the fundamental shortcut to feeling vibrant, fluid, and full of possibility.
Yes.
That's a massive promise. I mean, especially given how many people struggle with creative blocks or just feeling emotionally numb.
It is the promise of vitality itself. And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive. We want to extract those substantial knowledge nuggets, not just definitions, but the actual mechanics of how to activate and balance this center.
Okay.
We need to go beyond the basics. We need to understand the full blueprint, the 5 core emotional mechanics it runs, the deep psychological roots of the blocks, and then, most importantly, the practical 8-pillar healing path that the sources detail.
So let's begin right there with the identity of this energy. Give us the official definition, the Sanskrit, the location of this powerhouse of feeling.
Okay, so the Sanskrit name is Svadhisthana. It's the second energy center in the 7-chakra system, and you'll locate it physically just below your navel. It's situated right in the lower abdomen, encompassing the sacrum area.
Okay.
And anatomically, it's linked to the gonads and reproductive organs, which, that immediately tells you its primary functions are about creation, vitality, and sensuality.
And the translation itself, that holds the core lesson, doesn't it? I was really struck by this source's detail here. It translates as one's own place.
Yes, or,
Yeah.
I love this more poetic version, one's own sweetness.
One's own sweetness. Wow.
That phrase, that's the key. It moves Svadhisthana from being just a physiological function to a spiritual mission. It's a poetic reflection of what this center truly represents.
Which is?
It's the inherent capacity to find joy and desire and pleasure within your own existence, within your own being. You don't need an external stimulus for it. It defines the energy center's purpose to turn your internal state into, internal sustainable happiness. It's self-validation made manifest as energy.
The sources also highlight this crucial energetic shift when you move from the root to the sacral. I think that's essential context for anyone learning this. Can you elaborate on that evolution?
It's a complete energetic and philosophical evolution. So as we established, the root chakra grounds us for survival. It's concerned with, am I safe enough to live?
Right. Is there a roof over my head?
Exactly. But once that safety is secured, the energy rises to the sacral, and the question just radically changes. It becomes, am I alive enough to enjoy this?
Yeah.
Svadhisthana is that point where we transition from merely existing to truly experiencing. It allows us to feel, to create, and to really enjoy the sacred dance of existence, moving beyond fear and into flow.
And it's explicitly named in the source material as the seat of the divine feminine energy. Now, for listeners who might be new to that term, how do we unpack that concept, especially as it relates to this chakra, regardless of their gender identity?
That's a really important clarification. It's essential to stress that this concept of divine feminine energy it's archetypal. It's energetic. It is not at all dependent on biological sex.
Oh.
It's the flowing, receptive, intuitive, and fertile aspect of the universe. Think of it as the yin energy, the force that flows with the rhythm of life itself.
Like the tides.
The tides, the moon cycles, the processes of receiving and creation, yes. Where the masculine energy or yang seeks to build and structure and penetrate, the feminine, the yin, seeks to receive, to nurture, and to give birth to new ideas and experiences. Svadhisthana is where that receptive energy takes up residence. It allows us to yield to the natural current of life.
That sets up our deep dive perfectly. It moves us from that core need for survival, which the root provided, to these fundamental internal questions the sacral chakra invites us to ask ourselves.
Right.
Questions like, what brings me genuine joy? What stirs passion within me? How am I actively expressing my emotions and my creativity in the world?
Exactly. We're moving from the solid, predictable ground into the moving, powerful river. And if we can understand how that river flows, its physical blueprint, its elements, its mechanics, we can navigate life with so much more ease and vitality.
Okay, so let's unpack this blueprint of flow in detail. Before we get into the psychology of what Svadhisthana does, let's really establish the full technical specs, the anatomy, the symbolism as laid out in the sources. We need those specific nuggets that truly define its energetic signature.
Right, the language of the energy center. So as you said, the location is the lower abdomen, but we need to reiterate the physical connection here because it's tied to the gonads, reproductive organs, the bladder, kidneys, and the lower back.
And that explains so much.
It does. It explains why common manifestations of Svadhisthana blockages show up as physical issues in those exact areas. Things like chronic lower back pain or, difficulty with urinary flow. It's a direct reflection of the energetic stagnation of water.
The connection to generation and flow is so clear there. Okay, so now let's talk about the tools we use to work with it. Let's start with the sound.
The sound frequency, the mantra, is VAM. And this isn't just, a random syllable. It's a specific sound vibration that's designed to resonate in that lower abdominal area.
So it's a physical thing.
It's very physical. When you chant VAM properly, it doesn't just stimulate the center. It physically loosens the tension we hold in the fascia and the muscles around the hips and the sacrum.
Like a massage from the inside.
It's a rhythmic internal massage, yes. It stirs stagnant water into movement. So the practical application for you is to chant VAM for several minutes, really focusing that vibration low in your pelvis and just feeling for that subtle hum of vitality.
That detail about the physical sensation really helps. It makes it less abstract. Okay, now let's look at the symbol, which is so rich. The six-petaled lotus with a crescent moon inside.
The visual language here is crucial. The crescent moon, as we discussed, signifies that intuitive, cyclical rhythm, the feminine energy that waxes and wanes. And the sources note that the 6 petals represent the 6 forms of human experience that this chakra governs and filters.
Yeah.
And this is where we really expand the definition of Svadhisthana's scope.
Okay, let's dedicate a moment to detailing those 6 petals, because they really feel like the framework for everything we're about to discuss.
Absolutely. Think of them as the 6 gates through which the energy of the sacral flows. First, you have relationship. This governs how we interact and form deep bonds, focusing on that emotional exchange.
Okay, relationship.
Second, desire. And this isn't just physical desire. It's the desire for life, for creation, for growth, the motivation that moves us forward. Third is feeling, the capacity to fully experience and process the whole spectrum of human emotion, from elation to grief.
That's a big one.
It's huge. The fourth is taste. This governs the senses, and specifically the ability to find enjoyment in the physical world, savoring food, appreciating textures, enjoying sensation. Fifth, sexuality, the life-giving, sensual, and vital energy that connects us physically and emotionally. And sixth, this one is often overlooked, but it's inner communication.
What does that mean exactly?
It's the internal dialogue we have about our feelings and our needs. It's the voice that determines our self-worth and our confidence in expressing those needs.
That 6-pronged framework is, wow, it's so comprehensive. Moving on to the color, orange. It sits right between the root's stable red and the solar plexus's radiant yellow.
Orange is the color of enthusiasm, of warmth, of dynamic transformation. And why orange? Because it symbolizes the integration of that raw physical energy of red with the intellectual power of yellow. It sits in that liminal, transformative space.
The sources use a beautiful metaphor for it, the glow of a sunrise.
Exactly. The sunrise, that moment of potential right before the full demands of the day begin.
Yes.
It's the energy of awakening, the creative spark of new beginnings. It's this dynamic, active warmth that doesn't just sit still like the red earth. It actively pulls you forward toward light and warmth. When you visualize that rich, vibrant orange light in your lower belly, you are literally inviting that dynamic, enthusiastic energy of potential into your center.
This all culminates in the defining feature, which is the element, water. This is where the term flow comes from, and it feels like the real key to understanding the mechanism of the sacral.
Water is everything here. It symbolizes flow, adaptability, and critically emotional depth. We really can't talk about Svadhisthana without talking about the hydrodynamics of being human. Water is soft, but it's the most powerful element on the planet. It can wear away stone because it never stops moving. It yields, but it adapts.
I was really struck by the teaching in the source material. The water element reminds us to flow with life rather than resist it, mirroring the ever-changing tides of emotion. What happens physiologically when we do resist?
Resistance creates stagnation. And stagnation is the hallmark of a blocked Svadhisthana. Imagine a river that you try to dam up completely. You don't destroy the water, you just increase the pressure until it overflows, and often it does so violently or inappropriately. When we try to dam up grief or anger or even intense joy, we create this internal pressure, and it manifests as physical tension in the back, the hips, the reproductive organs.
So this chakra teaches us to be like the river.
Constantly moving, cleansing, and adapting. I mean, we are over 60% water. Our mental and emotional health is directly tied to honoring that natural fluidity inside of us.
Okay, so this is where we get into the functional mechanics. If the sacral chakra is a river, the source has defined 5 major streams that it powers. Let's explore those 5 core functions. Function number 1 is emotional awareness. How does Svadhisthana specifically manage the vast, often overwhelming nature of our internal emotional life?
It acts as the primary emotional processing center. And note I said processor, not generator.
Ah, okay, that's a key distinction.
It is. It governs how we experience and integrate the full spectrum of feelings. Joy, excitement, sadness, longing, intimacy, empathy. And the critical concept here, which the source emphasizes over and over, is balance.
Balance.
A healthy Svadhisthana means you can feel deeply, you can access the nuances of complex emotions without being overwhelmed or, submerged by those feelings.
So it isn't about achieving some kind of emotional stoicism. It's more like feeling the pain of sadness, processing the information that pain is giving you. Maybe it's pointing to a loss or an unmet need, and then allowing that feeling to move through you and out, rather than letting it take up permanent, debilitating residence.
You've just described it perfectly. That's true emotional intelligence. It's resilience. It allows you to empathize, to genuinely feel with someone else, but it also provides the necessary emotional boundary so that you don't absorb their experience.
So you don't take on their trauma.
You don't take on their trauma, their needs, and lose yourself in the process. It's the difference between compassionate witnessing and exhausting codependence. When this function is blocked, we either detach completely, that's numbness, or we absorb everything, which is volatility.
That distinction, witnessing versus absorbing, that is a really powerful tool.
Okay, that leads us directly into function 2, creativity and passion.
And again, Svadhisthana defines creativity very broadly. It's fueled by life force itself. It's the energy that drives the desire to bring anything new into existence.
So not just art.
Not just art. The sources are clear on this. It's not limited to painting or songwriting. It's about how we design our lives, how we solve complex problems at work, how we rearrange our living room to feel better, or even how we express our unique individuality through our style or how we communicate. It is the fundamental fuel for imagination in all its forms.
And the passion element, that intrinsic drive, where does that fit in? Passion is the emotional fire of the sacral chakra. It's the engine starter. If your passion is low, your creativity stays dormant. It's like an idea trapped in amber. Svadhisthana ensures that we have the inner drive, the enthusiasm, which literally translates to filled with divine presence, to actually execute on the ideas that spark in our minds. A lack of motivation is often just a blockage of the flow of passion.
Okay, moving on to function 3, which is the one I think many people immediately associate with the sacral: sensuality and pleasure. The source material is very careful to distinguish this from purely physical intimacy. It calls it the sacred aspect of pleasure.
This distinction is paramount, especially in a culture that often links pleasure only to, consumption or immediate gratification. While Svadhisthana certainly governs sexual energy and libido, its deeper function is about embracing the body as sacred.
As a vessel.
As a highly attuned vessel for joyful experience. Sacred pleasure means engaging deeply and mindfully with your senses.
Can you give us some practical, maybe non-physical examples of what that sacred pleasure looks like in daily life?
Absolutely. It's the deep, mindful appreciation of the physical world. It's savoring the taste of a complex meal, really noticing the texture of a sweater against your skin, feeling the warmth of the sun on your face, or just the joy of a good stretch after sitting for a long time.
Simple things.
The simplest things. It's recognizing those simple moments of sensory delight as sacred gifts, moments where you are completely present in your body, just appreciating existence. This function is about reclaiming the right to feel good in your body and mind without the crippling weight of guilt, shame, or the need for external validation. If you can't enjoy simple pleasures, your Svadhisthana flow is restricted.
Okay, function 4 addresses relationships and emotional bonds. Given that this center is so tied to emotion and connection, how does a balanced Svadhisthana help us have genuinely healthy interpersonal connections?
Well, because the sacral is the seat of emotional intelligence and adaptability, a balanced Svadhisthana allows for genuine emotional reciprocity. The sources highlight that it gives us the self-assurance we need to give love freely and receive love openly without that shadow of fear.
Fear of what, specifically?
Fear of rejection, fear of being controlled, or fear of emotional manipulation.
The fear of rejection or control, that seems like the default setting when the chakra is blocked, right? We become needy or we try to control how the other person feels about us.
Precisely. That neediness or that control, it stems from an inner emptiness. When the chakra is balanced, your own sweetness is stable and self-validated. This means you aren't dependent on a partner or a relationship to validate your worth or, fill your creative tank.
So it fosters healthy boundaries.
Healthy, permeable boundaries. We can connect deeply while still maintaining our self-sovereignty and allowing others to maintain theirs. It prevents those toxic cycles of merging or avoidance.
And finally, function 5, adaptability and flow. This feels like the integration point of all the functions, really leaning on that water metaphor.
This is the culmination of the sacral lesson. We live in a world of constant, unpredictable change, and the human default is often to try and control the environment or cling to rigid, comfortable patterns. Svadhisthana trains us to respond like water in real time. If life presents an unexpected obstacle, a job loss, a sudden move, a health issue, the sacral energy helps us bend instead of breaking.
So if we're operating from the root, an obstacle is a crisis that threatens our survival. But if we're operating from the sacral, it's just a change in the riverbed.
Exactly. If a massive boulder falls into the river doesn't freeze and fight the boulder. It doesn't waste energy arguing with reality. It flows around it. It incorporates the new feature into its path, and it keeps moving toward the ocean. This resilience, this intuition, this constant forward momentum that is the gift of the adaptable, flowing sacral chakra. It ensures we remain resilient, intuitive, and always moving toward creation, not contraction.
For the learner, I think knowing the signs is so crucial. If this energy is the engine of our pleasure and creativity, we need to understand the diagnostic signs, what it looks like when it's running well, and what happens when the tank runs dry or the system, overheats.
We have to start by internalizing the ideal state, the signs of a balanced chakra, which the sources beautifully call the inner glow.
The inner glow. That suggests a radiance that comes from within, not something applied from the outside. What does that radiance actually look like in a person's behavior?
Well, when Svadhisthana is in harmony, you project a genuine, effortless charisma. You radiate warmth, a strong emotional intelligence, and this natural creative vitality. Physically, you feel fundamentally comfortable in your body.
You move with grace.
You move gracefully.
Yeah.
You don't feel the need to constantly criticize it or hide it. You're confident in expressing your desires, not aggressively, but clearly. And you're open to intimacy and inspiration in your daily life.
And the sources specifically mention enjoying life's pleasures without guilt. That, for me, seems like the most significant indicator of sacral freedom.
Guilt is the greatest energetic poison to Svadhisthana. Balance means recognizing that joy, pleasure, sensuality, and creativity are sacred, inherent parts of life. They're not something you have to restrict or earn or feel ashamed of later. You embrace a flexible, adaptable outlook, strong empathy, and a deep appreciation for your senses. And crucially, this glow comes from the deep, self-validated joy of being alive, that inner sweetness, not from the external approval of others.
Yeah.
If you stop creating the moment the audience leaves, your flow is still dependent.
Okay. Now let's talk imbalance. The sources state that imbalance can be stagnant, so underactive, or it can be overactive. And it often points to deeper wounds, childhood conditioning, emotional neglect, past trauma that caused us to suppress our right to feel.
Imbalance is fundamentally an energetic defense mechanism. If you grew up in an environment where intense feelings like anger or joyful exuberance were deemed too much, or if pleasure was consistently linked to punishment or shame, you likely shut down the flow. That leads to an underactive state.
And the opposite.
Conversely, if you were starved of genuine emotional intimacy or validation, you might develop a desperate, frantic seeking. That leads to an overactive state. It's really vital for you, the listener, to recognize your dominant pattern.
Let's delve into the signs of stagnation, the blocked or underactive chakra. What does that lack of flow manifest as in behavior and mindset?
This is the emotional equivalent of a drought. You feel emotionally numb or detached, unable to access deep, rich feelings like profound joy or even healthy sadness. There's often suppressed creativity, or what we call creative sterility.
Creative sterility, that's a powerful term.
It's feeling completely dry, procrastinating heavily on projects, being unable to find new ideas, or being convinced your output won't be good enough. This is the inner critic winning, hands down.
And what are the physical and relational impacts of this kind of stagnation?
They're powerful. You'll experience low libido or profound disconnection from your own sensuality. You just feel detached from your body. The shame surrounding pleasure is a huge indicator. Any moment of enjoyment is often followed by a wave of self-judgment.
And it spirals.
It spirals. This chronic stagnation often spirals into general depression, apathy, or a pervasive lack of motivation because the life force, the passion, is not moving. You can't start the engine if the fuel itself is thick and cold and viscous.
Conversely, what happens when Svadhisthana is overactive, when the river is in flood stage?
This is characterized by a frantic, compulsive seeking of external stimulation to fill that inner void. You might display intense emotional overdependence on others, needing constant praise, attention, or validation to feel worthy.
So relationships become a source of fuel.
A source of fuel, but a volatile one. They often become manipulative, obsessive, or quickly cycle into high drama because the person is trying to force external connection to feel that sweetness they lack internally.
This often aligns with addictive behaviors too, doesn't it? Seeking the high that the internal flow isn't providing.
Exactly. The pleasure aspect becomes compulsive rather than mindful. This manifests as overindulgence or escapism addictive behaviors, seeking constant, intense stimulation, whether that's through hypersexuality, emotional eating, substance abuse, or excessive spending.
The goal is just to feel something.
The goal is always to feel something intense, to avoid the quieter, more complex emotions that are residing underneath. And this overactivity also presents as high emotional volatility, frequent mood swings, inappropriate emotional outbursts. The person is just tossed about by every incoming tide, unable to find that steady, self-contained center.
Now for the application, the actionable path forward. For anyone listening and recognizing these blockages, whether it's stagnation or volatility, the source provides 8 powerful, practical pillars to reclaim the right to feel and create freely. This is the deep dive into the healing mechanics.
And these pillars are designed to reintroduce flow, pleasure, and emotional safety. But we have to apply them consistently to, chip away at what could be decades of conditioning and shame.
Okay, let's start with pillar 1, movement and dance. We talked about physical stiffness representing energetic blocks, so how does movement specifically fix this?
It's a direct physical release. Since the chakra is tied to the hips and lower abdomen, which is where we physically hold emotional tension, fluid movement is the most direct way to unlock that trapped energy.
So not rigid exercise.
Exactly. The movement must be rotational and rhythmic, not rigid like a crunch or a plank. The sources suggest specific activities. Yoga hip openers that target the deep psoas muscle, often called the muscle of the soul, where we hold trauma.
Okay.
And belly dancing, or free flow dancing, where you focus on figure eights and pelvic circles.
Why are those specific rotational movements so effective? What's the mechanism?
They mimic the movement of water, the spiral, the wave, the ebb and flow. The goal here is not fitness or performance. It's about releasing energy without judgment. When you allow your hips to move freely, you are physically signaling to your sacral center that it is safe to release control, that it's safe to be sensual, and that it's safe to simply move the emotional energy that has been cemented in those joints and muscles. It's a direct physical remedy for emotional stagnation.
Pillar 2 brings us back to the primary element, water connection. How do we harness this element, beyond just drinking more water?
Since this chakra vibrates with water, spending intentional time near natural water bodies, lakes, rivers, the ocean is profoundly healing. Water acts as a natural energetic cleanser. But the sources also provide a very accessible indoor practice, the mindful bath ritual.
A mindful bath, that sounds like a powerful practice for sensory appreciation.
It is. The bath isn't just for cleaning, it's a ceremonial immersion into the element. They recommend adding essential oils like orange for that vibrational warmth and color, ylang-ylang to increase sensual energy, or sandalwood for grounding and reverence.
And there's a visualization component.
That's the crucial part. As you soak, you practice the visualization. You see the water completely washing away emotional tension, stress, shame, external energy. See it all flowing down the drain. Then, you visualize the water in the tub being replaced by vibrant, flowing orange light that fills your lower abdomen. This practice directly connects your energetic body with the element it needs to thrive.
Pillar 3, creative expression, reiterates that we have to channel emotion into form, but without that paralyzing fear of judgment.
This pillar is all about shifting the intention behind your creation. If you feel creatively blocked, it's usually because you're creating for external validation, and that puts immense pressure on the sacral energy. The healing comes from creating simply for the joy of the process.
So create something you intend to throw away.
Exactly. Write a messy poem, paint a canvas you plan to paint over, sing loudly in your car, cook an elaborate, nourishing meal just for you.
The medium is irrelevant. The motion is everything.
Yes, the act of translation, of turning an internal feeling into an external reality, that's the entire point. It reminds Svadhisthana that its core purpose is to create, not to be judged on the output. It is the practice of self-sovereignty in miniature.
And this feeds directly into Pillar 4. Emotional release. For those of us conditioned to suppress our feelings, this is often the most formidable challenge.
It is the most challenging because it requires vulnerability, but it is also the most potent. The core practice here is journaling without judgment.
Stream of consciousness.
Stream of consciousness writing, yes. Allowing raw emotion, whether it's irrational anger or buried desire, to just spill onto the page without editing or criticizing. The goal is just to get the energy out of your body.
And allowing the physical release, too, like tears or even frustration, to manifest physically.
Yes. The sources stress this simple principle. Emotion is energy in motion. You are sad, cry. If you are angry, find a safe way to vent that energy shout into a pillow, or engage in rigorous physical activity until the energy dissipates. When you allow that energy to move, whether through tears or writing or safe venting, healing follows because the energy is no longer stuck and stagnating. You are fulfilling the chakra's core function to flow.
Okay, moving to Pillar 5, we have the practical tools of mantra and affirmations. These are for actively reprogramming that deep-seated shame.
Right. Chanting VAM acts as a vibrational tuning fork, and we recommend incorporating that focused chanting for 5 to 10 minutes a day. But the affirmations are vital for changing the mind's relationship with pleasure and worthiness. The blockage often comes from ingrained subconscious beliefs like, I am not worthy of pleasure, or my emotions are a burden.
So we need to replace those old scripts with powerful, positive, and direct counter-statements. Let's hear those core affirmations again.
They're designed to be revolutionary self-statements. The first is, I honor my emotions and allow them to flow freely. That addresses the water element and the release of control.
Okay.
Then, I am a creative being full of inspiration, which addresses that creative sterility blockage. And critically, pleasure and joy are sacred parts of my life. This directly dissolves the guilt and shame around sensuality.
And the last one?
I deserve to feel and express love and passion. The consistent repetition of these statements, it really acts like a balm on the wounded inner self.
Pillar 6 covers the specific crystals that resonate with the sacral chakra's orange frequency.
Crystals function as energetic stabilizers and amplifiers. They help you hold the vibration of flow. For creativity and motivation, the source recommends carnelian. It has that warm, enthusiastic orange color and works to ignite that creative fire and self-confidence.
And for releasing stuck emotions.
To actively draw out and release those stuck emotional blockages, they suggest orange calcite.
And what about addressing the emotional volatility we talked about earlier, the overactive state?
That's where moonstone shines. Moonstone helps with emotional balance. It brings a calm, intuitive connection and gently taps into that cyclical feminine energy. And finally, sunstone is recommended to restore pure joy, exuberance, and sensual appreciation. It literally brings warmth back into the center.
And practically, how do you use them?
You can hold them near your lower abdomen during meditation, or wear them as jewelry positioned close to the sacral center.
Pillar 7 is all about dietary support, connecting the physical body to the chakra's energy via color and the element of hydration.
The recommended foods mimic the chakra's vibrant, active energy. So the orange foods, we're looking at oranges, mangoes, carrots, sweet potatoes, pumpkins, and apricots.
So it's very intuitive.
It is. These foods are rich in vitality, they promote warmth, and they often contain high levels of vitamins linked to skin health and energy. Additionally, the sources list nuts and seeds for their healthy fats and grounding nature, which provides a necessary stability to the flow.
But hydration is key.
Hydration is the most critical instruction. You cannot flow if you are dehydrated. Water is your primary ally. Constant, mindful hydration helps keep those energetic channels smooth and moving.
And finally, Pillar 8, healing with sound, which moves beyond the VAM mantra into specific frequency work.
Yes, this involves harnessing sound vibration technology to physically alter the energy state. The source specifies that listening to music with a 417 Hz frequency can help remove deeply held negative energy and trauma. It actively helps to align the Svadhisthana vibration.
With 417 hertz.
It's often called the undoing or redo frequency.
Yeah.
It's designed to facilitate deep cellular change and clear energetic blockages.
So that's the passive listening component. Are there active sound practices we can do?
Yes. The sources suggest simple rhythmic practices like drumming or singing. These activities use both internal and external sound wave to physically awaken the flow of the inner waters. When you establish a steady, conscious rhythm, you reintroduce structure and flow at the same time. This helps an overactive chakra calm down and an underactive one wake up. You're literally generating your own frequency of vitality.
We've covered the anatomy, the mechanics, the practical healing path. But as we draw this deep dive to a close, we have to explore the ultimate philosophical lesson that Svadhisthana offers. What are we supposed to learn about the experience of being human through this center?
This is the deepest insight the sources provide, and it directly addresses a pervasive spiritual and psychological trap in modern life. It's the profound lesson of integration, not suppression.
That's where I really want to press for detail, because I often hear people talk about trying to transcend or rise above their difficult emotions, getting rid of anger or sadness to reach some higher, purely blissful state.
That is the trap. The sacral chakra teaches that true mastery, true wholeness, is integration. You cannot achieve spiritual wholeness by energetically cutting off half of your human experience. The sources define emotion as divine communication from the soul.
Divine communication from the soul.
It is not a random inconvenience or a burden to be discarded. It is the most sophisticated form of data you possess.
If emotion is data, how do we begin to decode it? Because when we're flooded with anxiety or anger, it doesn't feel like helpful data. It feels like an attack.
It requires reframing. Svadhisthana encourages us to stop labeling our feelings as good or bad.
Yeah.
And instead we ask, what is this feeling teaching me?
Okay.
For example, anger. Anger is divine data signaling that a boundary has been violated or that a deep injustice has occurred. The flow isn't to suppress the anger, but to decode the message and set a healthier boundary.
I see.
Sadness or grief. That's divine data signaling that something of value has been lost or that a need is unmet. So the flow is to honor the value of what was lost rather than fighting the reality of the loss itself.
And fear.
Fear or anxiety. That's divine data signaling a potential threat or that you're resisting change. The flow is to acknowledge the resistance and then move forward with fluid small steps, like water flowing around an obstacle. By fully accepting our complex emotional reality, we stop wasting energy resisting life. And that's when true resilient flow begins. We stop seeing feelings as inconvenient interruptions and start viewing them as vital, real-time guidance from the deepest part of ourselves.
That shift from resistance to acceptance, that creates the space for the final, highest lesson you mentioned, creative sovereignty. How does honoring our emotions lead to this self-rule?
Sovereignty means self-rule, and Svadhisthana teaches that your passion and your unique emotional landscape are divine tools for creation. When you honor your authentic desires, when you respect the communication your soul is giving you, and you express that freely without seeking permission, you are claiming creative sovereignty over your life.
You stop waiting.
You stop waiting for external circumstances, or a change in your relationship status, or permission from society to create happiness or pursue your calling. Instead, you recognize that you are the origin point of your experience. You participate fully in the dance of the universe itself, recognizing your inherent power as a co-creator of your own reality.
The journey, then, is truly from just surviving the stable root chakra to fully feeling, creating, and flowing, which is the undeniable, sweet gift of the sacral.
It is the evolution from simply needing to be safe to daring to be expressive, sensual, and passionately alive. The moment you decide to fully feel, you allow yourself the grace and joy to fully live. As we close this deep dive, just take a moment to reflect on the poetic truth of Svadhisthana. Healing this center isn't about perfection. It's about awakening the inner artist, the inner lover, the inner dreamer. It's about reclaiming your fundamental, sacred right to feel deeply, love fully, and live passionately, guided effortlessly by the flow.
The text leaves us with these final whispers from the energy of the sacral chakra itself, urging us into this necessary action.
You are the creator of your experience.
Your joy is sacred.
Your passion is divine.
Flow, beloved soul, flow.
And here is a thought for you to carry forward this week, building on this deep dive into vitality. If your emotions truly are divine communication, what critical message, perhaps fear, shame, or intense longing, are you currently ignoring or suppressing by trying to keep your river still? How might allowing that suppressed message to move and flow freely reshape the next week of your life and unlock your creative potential?
Thank you so much for sharing your sources and for joining us on this extensive deep dive into flow, creativity, and the immense sweetness of being alive. Until next time.